Hey guys, I'm Jay.
And I'm Jaimie.
And today, we're gonna turn this board
into an armchair river table. We just got this really cool chair, and it's great. It's super comfy, but there's like nowhere to put your drink. So what we want to do is build a little table that comes up and over the arm and have a little platform that you can set drinks on. And to make it cool, we're going to turn it into a waterfall river table using epoxy.
So we picked up this piece of Australian red cedar with this nice live edge on it. This is a hardwood. It's actually in the mahogany family, so it's got this beautiful dark red heartwood, and then the sapwood is a really bright yellow. So let's get going and see how it goes. First thing we did was prep the wood by ripping off the live edge we were going to use. Now we marked a straight line, and then over at the bandsaw we ripped it off. And you can see towards the back we got a lot of flex, which generally means the wood wasn't dried properly, and that's going to cause us a lot of problems later, which you'll see.
You have turned one piece of wood into two.
So far so good.
Next we're going to mill the wood, and that's so we can get out the wobbles and make it kind of a nice even thickness. These boards are nice, but they were super twisty, so we had to work a little magic to get them flat.
I had to take off more material than I expected. These were really kind of twisty. They're a little thinner than I expected them to be, but luckily nobody cares. Once we had the pieces ready, we were able to sort of align the live edge to figure out how the river was going to go, and we had a little extra material, so we ripped it off with the table saw.
We're going to measure out the 20 inches of wood that we want to keep. It's 20 inches because it's about 7.5 for the top, 6 for either side, and then a ½ inch to spare for cutoffs and things like that. Since we had some extra length, I was able to offset the boards to find the coolest river layout. So we marked it and then cross-cut off the edges with the table saw. Cullen was there to help us keep on schedule, and then we moved on to cleaning up the live edge. To do that, we're using this really awesome metal stuff called dragon skin, and then we're finishing it up with some sandpaper. We have turned one piece of wood into two beautiful riverbanks.
What do you think?
Do you like them? So what's next?
We have to build a form, and we're going to put those inside it so that when we pour the epoxy, it all basically stays in the river.
So we have to dam the river?
Yes.
Building the form was fairly straightforward. We used MDF and then measured it so the wood would fit tightly inside. We covered all the inside faces in packing tape so the epoxy doesn't stick to the form.
We got these screws that are specifically for holding MDF to MDF, which is what we're going to do. So we're going to try those.
Usually it's hard to screw MDF to itself because it kind of comes apart, so these screws make it really easy. You also don't have to drill pilot holes, which is really nice. Jaimie's cuts were spot on, so these two sides fit really well. So then we took some hot glue to stick the boards down to the form so that they don't float up when we pour the epoxy. The glue also helps to seal up the ends. We then measured the average width to see how much epoxy we'd need.
Okay, so we measured we need 22 ounces of epoxy to fill the river. And that accounts for a little bit of extra in case we're just bad at math, which we are.
Could be. This is really hard to push. This is gonna take forever.
Okay.
Perfect. So we've played around with epoxy before, but we've never actually used it for a real project. After mixing it, we divided into 2 cups using a stick to help eliminate air bubbles. Then we dyed 1 cup green and the other cup blue, and we put some really cool mother of pearl flakes inside. I was really excited about these flakes. They just looked so cool once they were in the epoxy. After leveling it, we started to pour the epoxy. Now what we were hoping to achieve here was a semi-translucent, sparkly river greenish-bluish effect. Now, when we actually got it all poured, it's turned out to be more translucent than we wanted. So what we did was we put more ink on top of green and blue, swirled it around, and then put even more ink, and then swirled it around again. And then more ink, and swirled it around one more time. When we were done swirling, it actually looked pretty cool, so we called it good. The final product, however, looked nothing like this, but we'll get to that later. Then Jay got to pop bubbles with fire, and we let it dry.
After letting it completely cure, we took it out of the form by releasing all of the screws, and then thanks to the tape, it popped right out.
So it's been 2 days. We let the epoxy cure completely, and we have a river.
We do! We have a beautiful little river here. What do you think about it?
I think it's awesome. I mean, some unexpected stuff happened. Like you can see that all of the ink that Jaimie meticulously designed just sort of pooled to the edges and looks nothing like we left it. Also, gravity happened and all of our mother of pearl flakes sank to the bottom, which created something pretty cool, but again, not what we expected.
I mean, it's kind of cool. It looks like a little sandy riverbed down there, so not too bad.
Hey buddy, we made a river.
What do you think?
Sadly, the other thing is that it was no longer flat, not even a little bit. So, well, we didn't have many options, so we ran it through the planer to see what we could do.
So I may have accidentally just planed off all of the mother of pearl flakes that Jaimie put in the epoxy. They were literally right on the bottom, so the first pass through the planer, they all just came off. What are the odds that she's not going to notice?
In hindsight, the planer was not a great idea. I probably could have just sanded it and maintained a lot of that look and still ended up with it being pretty flat. In the end, we got it looking good though. Nothing like what we expected, but hey, looks awesome.
The next phase of our project was to cut our board into 3 pieces with mitered corners so that our river becomes a waterfall. Over at the table saw, things went awry again. Because the board wasn't perfectly flat, the wood moved as we were cutting it and screwed up the miter. So we brought out the crosscut sled and cut the miters that way to fix them. Luckily, this worked pretty well and we were able to recover. We dry fit it all together, took it inside to test fit it, and there was another problem.
One thing that happens sometimes in design is we forgot to account for the fact that when you're sitting in a certain position in the chair, this is actually going to hit your leg. So after all that, we're going to trim this inside one a little bit to make it work better.
Because that piece was pretty small, we used a hold down clamp on the sled and that worked really well. We used the same sled to square up the opposite side by trimming off a little piece. To help with the assembly and the glue up, we decided to use some biscuits, so we put in some slots and then modified them a little bit because we needed them to be really small, so we basically just cut some biscuits in half. With so much going not quite the way we wanted it, we had a pretty uneventful glue up. We pre-placed some blue painter's tape to help us assemble it, and then we applied glue with a craft brush, put the biscuits in the slots, and everything went together pretty nice. Big thing was trying to limit the glue squeeze out so we didn't have a lot of cleanup, but we did use a straw to get it out of the interior corner. We let the glue dry overnight and everything was looking good. Next was to prep the surface for finish. We used a block plane to chamfer the outer corners, and then on the mitered corners we used some sandpaper just to make sure it wasn't sharp. We raised the grain on the wood by spraying some water on it, and then once it dried, we hit it with some 320 grit sandpaper. And a little burnishing with some hand plane shavings gives you a really nice surface. We wanted the table to be water resistant, so we used water locks for the finish and applied it with a rag. We ended up doing 4 coats of this, and it came out looking really good. With a nicely prepped surface and an oil finish, it's really hard to go wrong.
I don't know if we've ever had quite so many things go wrong in a single project before. Probably, but this was definitely a lot. So many things happen, but hey, if you're gonna make something you never made before, sometimes you gotta take that risk. I think it came out really good. Let's go take a look. Thanks for sticking around. You know, sometimes YouTube makes stuff like this look super easy, but the fact is we mess up all the time. And in fact, we have a bunch of other videos over here you can check out where we sometimes mess up, sometimes not so much, but they're a lot of fun. You can also subscribe to the Wicked Makers channel if you like our stuff, and leave us a comment, hit the like button, it really helps us out a lot. Until next time, stay wicked. We also have a channel that you can subscribe to.